I moved into my new apartment about 3 weeks ago. It was a good deal for the area. Newly renovated, reasonable rent, and close to work. The landlord, an older guy named Mr. Graves, was eager to get someone in. He handed me the keys, gave me a half-hearted rundown of the place, and that was that. First, everything seemed normal. The place smelled like fresh paint. The floors were spotless, and all the appliances worked fine. But there was one thing that stuck out: the closet in the bedroom. When I first opened it, I noticed deep scratch marks running down the inside of the door. Not just a few, dozens, maybe hundreds, like someone had dragged a sharp object down it over and over. I ran my fingers over the grooves. They were deep. When I asked Mr. Graves about it, he waved it off. That? Probably from moving furniture in and out. Don't worry about it. That didn't sit right with me. The marks were too erratic, too clustered. But I let it go. It was a cheap apartment, and I had other things to worry about. A few nights in, I started hearing faint noises at night. Nothing dramatic, just soft tapping sounds. They came from inside the closet. At first, I figured it was the pipes or something shifting in the walls, but it kept happening. Every night, around the same time, I'd hear it. Tap, tap, tap. I told myself it was nothing, until I found the fingernails. I was cleaning the closet one morning when I ran my hand over the scratches again. That's when I noticed something lodged in one of the grooves. Tiny, pale fragments. I pulled a couple out and stared at them. They were jagged, brittle. At first, I thought they were splinters, but then I looked closer. Fingernails. I felt my stomach turn. Human fingernails, broken and wedged into the wood. I dropped them and stepped back. The room suddenly felt different, colder. I told myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe the last tenant had a dog or something. But that didn't explain the scratching. That night, the knocking started again. But this time, it was louder, more deliberate. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself it was in my head. Then, out of nowhere, the closet door creaked open. I shot up, heart hammering. The door was open just an inch, but I knew for a fact I had closed it before bed. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, shining it into the closet. Nothing, just my jackets hanging there, perfectly still. I barely slept that night. The next day, I decided to ask the building manager, a guy named Leo, if he knew anything about the last tenant. He hesitated, then sighed. Dude, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but the last guy, he just vanished. Like, full-on disappeared. Left all his stuff behind. Cops looked into it, but they never found anything. Just gone. I felt a chill creep up my spine. Did they ever find his key? I asked. Leo frowned. Now that you mention it, no. The landlord was pissed. Said he never turned it in. Had to get the locks changed. I nodded and left, my head spinning. If the last tenant disappeared, why was I hearing knocking from the closet? That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone in the apartment. Every creak, every distant sound set me on edge. I sat on the couch, scrolling through my phone, trying to distract myself. That's when I noticed the bathroom vent. One of the screws was missing. I don't know what made me do it, but I grabbed a screwdriver and pried it open. Inside, tucked away in the corner, was a small, old-fashioned key. I held it in my palm, staring at it. It was different from my apartment keys, older, made of heavy brass. My first thought was the missing key, the one the last tenant never turned in. I spent the next hour trying it on every lock in the apartment. The front door, the bathroom, even the cabinets. Nothing. But then I looked at the closet. My hands were shaking as I walked over. I slid the key into the lock just beneath the handle and turned it. Clicked. I swallowed hard. The closet had a lock? Why? Slowly, I pulled the door open, half expecting something, or someone, to lunge out. Nothing. Just my clothes, the scratched-up door, and the same uneasy feeling that had been there since I moved in. But then I noticed something else. One of the floorboards looked off. It was slightly raised, just a tiny bit higher than the rest. I got down on my knees and pressed against it. It wobbled under my touch. I dug my fingers into the edge and pried it up. Underneath, Wrapped in an old cloth was a phone. My throat went dry. It was cracked. The screen shattered. But when I pressed the power button, it lit up. One message was typed out on the screen. It wasn't sent. Just sitting there waiting. He has a key. I can't get out. I barely had time to process it before I heard it. The front door unlocking. Not just opening, unlocking. A slow, deliberate turn of the knob. My breath caught in my throat. I wasn't expecting anyone. I grabbed the phone and bolted for the bedroom, shoving the closet door shut behind me. I pressed my ear against the wood, barely breathing. The front door creaked open. Heavy footsteps. Slow. Measured. I clutched the phone so tight my fingers ached. My mind was racing. Who had the key? Was it the landlord? Someone else? The footsteps stopped in the living room. Silence. Then, a quiet, deliberate tap on the closet door, right next to my ear. I don't remember how long I stayed there. Frozen, barely breathing. Maybe minutes, maybe hours. Eventually, I heard the front door close again. The lock clicked. When I finally got the courage to open the closet door, the apartment was empty. But on the floor, right in front of my bedroom door, was a key. An old brass key, just like mine. I moved into my new apartment on a Tuesday. It was a tiny studio, nothing fancy, but the rent was cheap, and it was in a decent neighborhood. The place had an old, slightly musty smell, but I figured a few candles and an open window would take care of that. The first night, I heard it, the faintest scratching sound coming from the air vent above my bed. It was soft, irregular, like something small was moving inside. Mice, I told myself. Maybe even a rat. Gross, but not the end of the world. I called the landlord in the morning. Over the next few days, little things started to go missing. At first, it was just small, almost forgettable items. A sock, a spoon, my toothbrush. I wasn't exactly the most organized person, so I chalked it up to misplacing them in the chaos of moving. But then, one night, I came home from work and found my closet door open. I always kept it shut. Always. A chill crawled up my spine, but I forced myself to laugh it off. Maybe I left it open in the morning and just didn't remember. Then came the night that changed everything. I woke up suddenly, the room pitch black except for the dim glow of my phone charging on the nightstand. Something felt off. The air was heavy, thick with an unfamiliar scent. And then I saw it, the air vent. The cover was ajar. A cold sweat broke out on my skin as I stared, my mind racing through every possible explanation. Maybe the screws were loose. Maybe the building just settled weirdly. But then, why did it feel like something was watching me? The next day, I couldn't shake the unease. I needed to know if I was losing my mind. So I did something I never thought I'd have to do. I set up my phone to record while I slept, just to prove to myself that it was nothing. The following morning, my heart pounded as I checked the footage. I fast-forwarded through the first few hours, just seeing myself toss and turn. But at exactly 3:14 a.m., the vent cover slid open. My breath caught in my throat. Pale hand emerged, fingers long and bony. It moved slowly, deliberately, reaching out and tugging at the edge of my blanket. Just a small adjustment, like someone tucking me in. Then it retreated. The vent cover was carefully pushed back into place. I dropped my phone, my entire body trembling. There was no way. I wanted to believe it was a prank, a trick of the light, something, anything, other than the reality pressing down on me. Someone was living in my walls. I didn't waste another second. I grabbed my keys, my phone, and ran out of the apartment. I didn't even stop to put on shoes. The police arrived within 20 minutes. I showed them the video, and even the officer, who had probably seen everything, looked disturbed. They searched the apartment, then the vents. That's when they found it. Behind the vent was a small crawl space, just big enough for a person to squeeze through. Inside, they found a crumpled sleeping bag, food wrappers, and worst of all, my missing things. My toothbrush, my socks, a fork, and a stack of photographs. All of them were of me. Some were taken in the daytime while I was eating or working on my laptop. Others were taken at night, while I slept. The last one, right on top, was from the night before. My face, peaceful in sleep, my blanket slightly adjusted. The landlord was called in, looking nervous and uncomfortable. Finally, he admitted this wasn't the first time a tenant had complained about strange activity in that unit. The last person broke their lease and moved out suddenly, refusing to say why. I didn't stay long enough to demand a refund. I left that same day, crashing on a friend's couch until I found another place. I wasn't even looking for a new place when I found the ad. It just popped up while I was scrolling through listings out of curiosity. One-bedroom apartment in a luxury high-rise, prime location, and the rent way lower than it should have been. I figured it was a scam, but I had to check it out. When I got there, the place was perfect. Clean, spacious, great view. The landlord was this older guy, maybe in his late 60s, kind of absent-minded but friendly enough. He barely asked me any questions before handing me the lease. "Just a temporary lease," he said, waving off my concerns about the lack of paperwork. "Month to month, all utilities included. Just don't cause trouble and we're good." I should have been suspicious, but I was too caught up in my luck. I moved in that weekend. The first week was uneventful. I was busy with work and settling in, and nothing seemed off. The neighbors were quiet. The building was well maintained, and the location was perfect. Then I started getting mail. At first, it was just a couple of letters, but they weren't addressed to me. The name on them was someone I'd never heard of, Michael Langston. The weird part, the postmarks were old, like years old. 2016, 2018, 2019. I figured it was a mistake. Maybe the guy used to live here, and the post office was just behind on forwarding. I mentioned it to a neighbor in the elevator one day, some guy in his 40s who had apparently lived in the building for years. "Langston," he frowned. "Nah, don't think anyone's lived in that unit for a long time." "That's weird," I said. "I just moved in." He gave me a look but didn't say anything else. That night, I checked the building directory. My unit wasn't listed. Things got weirder after that. Little things at first. My key felt stiff in the lock sometimes, like the mechanism had changed slightly. I'd come home to find my blinds drawn when I was sure I left them open. Then one night, I woke up to the sound of knocking. Not at my door, inside my apartment. It was faint, but I swear I heard it. A soft, rhythmic tapping, like someone was knocking on the walls from the other side. I told myself it was just the pipes. Old buildings make noise, right? But something about it made my skin crawl. The next morning, my key didn't work. I jiggled it, twisted it, tried again and again, but the lock wouldn't budge. I had to go down to the landlord's office. He barely glanced up when I walked in. "My key stopped working," I said. "Can you get it fixed?" He looked genuinely confused. "Which unit?" 1408. His expression shifted. He looked at me like I'd said something insane. "I don't manage that unit." I laughed awkwardly. Yeah, you do. You rented it to me 2 weeks ago." "I've never rented out 1408. I felt a cold wave of nausea hit me. "You literally gave me the keys yourself." He shook his head, looking almost concerned. "That unit's been empty for years. I don't know what possessed me, but I needed answers." That night, I waited until the office was empty and snuck in. The building kept physical records in a dusty old filing cabinet. I rifled through the folders until I found the one for 1408. There was no lease under my name. The last tenant listed, Michael Langston, and the status of the unit, permanently sealed off. The notes were vague, but they mentioned a disappearance. The tenant had vanished without a trace. No forced entry, no signs of a struggle, just gone. And for some reason, instead of re-renting the unit, the building had supposedly sealed it. Except I had been living there for 2 weeks. I ran back to my floor, my mind racing. When I turned the corner, my heart nearly stopped. My apartment door was wide open. I knew I had locked it before I left. I stood there for a second, listening, but the hallway was dead silent. Slowly, I stepped inside. The apartment was empty. I don't mean it was ransacked. I mean, it was empty. No furniture, no clothes, no boxes. No sign that I had ever lived there. It looked exactly like it did when I first moved in. I felt sick. I checked my pockets for my phone, but my hands were shaking too much to pull it out. I turned to leave, and that's when I saw him. A man was standing in the hallway, staring at me. I don't know how long he'd been there, but his expression was blank. Not angry, not curious, just empty. I took a step back. He didn't move. "Who are you?" I croaked. He just blinked, then slowly shook his head. I ran. The next day, I tried to go back, but my key still wouldn't work. I banged on the door, yelled for someone to let me in, but nothing. Eventually, security came up and asked me what I was doing. When I told them I lived there, they looked at me like I was insane. "There's no tenant in 1408, one of them said. "Hasn't been for years. I don't know what to do. My stuff, everything I own is gone. My lease, my payments, my records. It's like I was never there. And the landlord? He doesn't remember me. I don't know where to go from here, but I can't shake this feeling.